the after effect that whatever you're bound to, whatever binds you, is also intimately linked with feeling separate and other than. So it's a bit unfortunate, this sort of notion of love that we have that comes down to us. And I know I'm painting just one particular side, and this, we also, I think many of us get a little fuller picture than I'm talking about, but I want to emphasize this aspect of love, because if this is what all we know of it, then number one, then we are setting ourselves up to be deceived, tricked by this, the cunningness, the sleight of hand maneuvers of this particular type of love. And I imagine most people in this room have fallen victim to it, right? This love that binds you together and you lose your senses, right? Right? You made me do it. I didn't want to do it. Right? Right? It's a cunningness, it's an unconsciousness that I think most of us in this room at one time or another have been swept into. And then at some point in the sweeping process, maybe when you've been swept all the way in, at some point you kind of go, how did I get here? This isn't what it promised to be. It's felt so incredibly, amazingly right, however. It felt more right than anything, do you know? And so that's what some of the ancients knew. That's what, you know, like I said, so in other cultures, many more cultures than I'll mention, but like in Greece, they had a certain respect. Also, they fell lock, stock, and barrel for the deceptiveness of love, but at least they had the idea that it can be very deceptive and cunning and can pull us into a confusion. And yet, that's, in one sense, that's what incarnation seems to be all about. If it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be incarnated. You wouldn't be here. Unless mom and dad weren't drawn together in a bond of grasping love, you and I wouldn't be here. So again, these things aren't good or bad. Nothing's really good or bad. It's how you see it. So like I said, unfortunately, there's not really, we have to borrow other words from other cultures to find out a bigger view of love. Probably, and this word has got into our culture, although it's not used very often, this word of agape. And agape is a completely different type of love. Often it's thought of as a selfless love. It's a love, agape is a love without need or want. It's a love that flows out of fullness rather than a love that's looking for fullness or wholeness. It flows out of wholeness. That's what agape is. And one can't really fake agape. Do you know? This is the kind of love that Jesus was talking about. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's agape. Our love would be possess your neighbor as yourself. And scratch your head and wonder why you have a 50% divorce rate. Expect your neighbor to fill up yourself. All of that. But agape is something quite different. Agape comes from a wholeness. And it's an outflow rather than a gathering. Rather than a desire being satisfied. Because all spiritual teachings in their own way have said, you know, one of the greatest impediments to our own realization is desire. But what I found is not many people have desire. Desires, everybody thinks they know what desire means, right? I want this, I want that, you know. Desire and aversion. But the amazing thing is in our culture, we worship desire. Don't we? We literally worship desire. Whether it's desire for another human being or a desire for the next thing or the next gadget or the next toy or the next something. If it wasn't for desire, our whole economy would just come to a screeching halt. the whole world would come to a screeching halt. Who knows what it would look like in the after effect, but it probably wouldn't look too pretty in the transition. So this kind of desire, this wanting, this craving, which comes from when we're identified simply with our exterior nature, our incarnation. That's what incarnation does. It desires, whether it wants to or not. It wants. It seeks union. It seeks joining. Because our incarnated nature is that, and I'm not making it wrong, it's not wrong. It's not wrong at all. In fact, it has a great, great beauty to it. An unfathomable beauty that we can only see when we start to wake up to a different kind of love. Different kind of love. So, this incarnated nature we have senses a certain incompleteness. Wasn't for incompleteness, nobody would be on a spiritual path. I'd be out of a job, which would be fine with me. I've done other things. I can find something else to do. Actually, my job is to put myself out of work as fast as possible. Really, if one's doing it honestly. But it comes from a forgetfulness, because that's part of what happens when we incarnate. There's forgetfulness, a simple forgetfulness. Whether you call it ignorance or maya or misunderstanding, it's a power of forgetfulness. We forget that what we really are is pure, immortal spirit. Incarnation does that for you. You forget it quickly. And then, of course, as soon as you forget it, you'll feel that hole, that emptiness, that yearning, that wanting. And the first place we go to try to solve that, address it, is through desire, isn't it? Wanting. This will solve it, that will solve it, this person will solve it, that person will solve it. And for a while things seem good. I got what I wanted, do you know? I got my 800-inch TV. I'm happy. But not for long, huh? Not for long. Maybe a night or two. You know? Then it's just another appliance in the house. And so that's kind of how it all goes. So it's kind of funny, it can never be satisfied. In Buddhism, they have this wonderful, I always think it's wonderful, but it's kind of actually horrific, I suppose, but this image of a hungry ghost. And the hungry ghost is about talking about, guess who? You and me. This side of when we forget what we are, in one sense we become a hungry ghost. And a hungry ghost is depicted as this ghost with its head back and its mouth wide open like a baby bird, you know, when they're waiting for mom to stuff the food down their beak. And its stomach is bottomless. There's no bottom. So no matter how much it gets, it goes right in and through, and it's never satisfied. Never gets quite enough, never gets enough, which makes it want more. I want more, I want more, more. But never really being satisfied. Now this is why spiritual teachers for thousands of years have said to people, in their own way, don't count on your desires to make you happy. The problem with that is people just went around and tried to stop desiring. But trying to stop desiring is about the stupidest thing you could waste your time with. Because trying to stop desiring is simply what? Desiring to not have a desire. Which is the most convoluted, hidden, deceptive desire there is. So it doesn't work, does it? It doesn't work to look at it that way. And it's perfectly okay to have that kind of desire. that wanting to join, to be close, intimate. There's nothing wrong with it. It's part of your incarnation. But also, don't forget that everything's a double-edged sword. What is so beautiful and amazing, this ability to join, become close, also has its counterpart, the ability to deceive, to make one go unconscious. And it's happened to everybody in this room, myself included. And so you can't just throw that kind of desire out the window, because it doesn't work like that. But when you've been through enough cycles, which if you're here, you've been through a lot of cycles. If you're here, you've been through lots of cycles, and something in you is starting to get on to something, at least, right? Something in you is going, the next thing isn't going to quite do it. Like I said earlier, you know, and I know in these circles there can still be the idea, if I just find my soulmate, if I could just, you know, if I could just find somebody better than that belly scratching, TV watching, remote gobbling husband that I have, I'll be happy. Well, maybe you will be happier, who knows? But there'll still be that wanting, that yearning, that desire. And it's the same thing with even our desire for God. It's the desire for union, the desire to be possessed. And I don't mean like the devil, I mean like possessed in the arms of the beloved, disappear into the beloved. And that's used to draw us in also. But you can also disappear 1,000 times into the arms of the beloved and still want to disappear yet again. And if you know what you're doing, it's fine. If you know what you're doing, it's fine. Then it's a wonderful, beautiful game. If you know what you're doing, if you know what you're engaged in, it's fine. Someone like a Ramakrishna, this great devotion to the Divine Mother, to disappearing into the arms of her infinite embrace and losing himself. And yet, he wasn't even trapped by that. Why wasn't he trapped by it? Because he knew what he was, that's why. Because he knew his immortal nature, his spiritual essence. And so he could do that. He could join with this aspect of divinity and lose himself. And yet it's different because he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was. He wasn't looking for completion in that. He wasn't looking for satisfaction in it. It was just part of his destiny of his incarnation. That's how he was going to kind of do it. But he also saw no ultimate separation between him and that. That makes all the difference in the world. So we don't really find a whole lot of agape in simply our exterior nature. Our agape comes from our essence. And our essence is an outflow. It's just the opposite. And I imagine most people in this room have touched upon this at times, at moments. You've touched upon it. Of course, it has its own exquisite beauty to it, its own amazing fullness. But essentially, the difference between agape and what we think of as love is something we want, or we desire, or we want to be possessed by, or disappear into. And agape is an outflow. The flip side of transcendence, which is the fullness of spirit. The fullness of spirit is the overflow. or you've got more than you need. And it's there within everybody. It's just recognizing your essential nature, your own divinity. Because really, truly, everyone in this room is a completely divine, immortal spirit. And I try to point that out all the time. That within that body of incarnation and its conditioning and its karma that it carries around, that it's filled to the brim everywhere with your true nature. That spiritual essence is everywhere. But it's very much like love. If you don't know where to look, you look in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways. And therefore you can never be satisfied. But if you look in the right way, in the right place, if you look inside for what's already whole, that unobstructed consciousness, call it whatever you want. Unobstructed consciousness, spirit, pure consciousness, the self, Christ consciousness. But that inside you that is unconditioned, it's already pure, already free. It's just waiting your recognition. That's all. Your devotion. Because as I said at the beginning of this retreat, a retreat is a time where we become devoted to this essential, beautiful nature of ours. Because the truth of the matter is, so many people are actually devoted to something entirely different. Does that make sense? And that's a beautiful thing if you can see it without judgment. If you can look and just go, what am I devoted to? Am I really devoted to what's whole and complete, to that silent and unwavering, bright, radiant no-thingness? Do I give it much attention? Do I give it the slightest glance? Am I devoted to it? Because remember, your most prized commodity, the thing that matters to every human being's most, is where you put your attention. That proves what you really value, doesn't it? We can think, oh, I value this and this and this and this and this, and then sometimes you look and you realize you don't put much attention on the things you value. What you value is exactly what you put your attention on. And if you find yourself not putting your attention on on the real things that you deeply value, you don't have to sit around and feel bad for it, because that's just another form of self-deception. It really is. As I said, if guilt and shame worked, I'd be all for it. But it doesn't. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. But when you see, what I'm devoted to, what I put my attention on so much of the time, simply really isn't satisfying. It's just not satisfying. It's not wrong to do it. It's just not satisfying. When you see it's not satisfying, that it doesn't deliver the promise, then quite naturally and quite spontaneously, you'll become devoted to something else. It's like somebody who is, since we're talking about love, somebody who is, let's say, spends the first, 30, 40, 50, sometimes longer, 60 years of their life being like completely, like shopping lovers around like you would shop for, a better fruit or something, As soon as they fall in love, they're kind of, they're done. They're out the door, And of course, there's nothing good or bad about that either. But it's like somebody who does that, so maybe for many years, maybe for 2 years, maybe for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever. And then one day they realize, that just isn't giving me what I want. It's not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's just not fulfilling. And so something in them realigns to something more real and true. It's really like that. To sit around and feel bad about it wouldn't change anything or anybody. It's just seeing what really brings fulfillment. And if you stay with for a while, if you really stay with, if you stay with this unobstructed, unconditioned consciousness, not your mind. Your mind's conditioned to the hilt, so quit looking towards it to be unconditioned. That space of consciousness in which all that conditioning arises, if you really start putting your attention on that, no matter how subtle it may seem, if you really do that with any consistency at all, it will come alive. It really will. It really will. It really will. I tell people that all the time. Just dwell in that. If you're going to think about something, just describe to yourself the aspects of your own conscious awareness. Feel it, sense it, and it will come alive. It'll come awake. Like most things do. You put your attention on things, they put their attention on you. And then at some point, it will start to flow out. At some point, you'll start to see that spiritual essence everywhere you look. Call it by whatever name you want. You'll see consciousness everywhere. You'll see the presence of God everywhere. You'll see the face of God everywhere. And then the rest you'll see secondarily. Does it make sense? You look at the tree, you see the face of God, you'll know it, you'll feel it, you'll sense it, it's there. Secondarily, in your back of your mind, you'll still know it's a tree. Don't remember, you won't forget. When you look from the heart, and all the minds that are out there saying, how do I do that? I can't tell you how, because there's not a how to it. Okay? Look from the heart. Feel into what you're looking at. Don't just look at it. You have all these other senses through which spirit operates. But unfortunately, when we look, we only look. That's all we do. We look, well, not only look, that would be fine, but we look and we're commentating on what we look at. But we just look. Not very many people look and actually feel and sense and are open and have their whole being involved in what they're looking at. And when you do, you start to see and you start to experience something quite different. You see, because you have to look with wholeness to see wholeness. If you just look very partially, you don't see much at all. Do you know, I think love is like one of those things, if it's described too accurately, we lose something about it. And love is something also that is this story I've told a few times, but it's probably the best description of love I've ever heard. And it's not a description at all, but it still does it. Of a man who used to come to my meetings when things were very small, like 8 or 10 people. It's a wonderful man from Japan, and very small group, and people were kind of talking about love and, you know, and marriage and all these things. And this guy, all of a sudden, he almost never said anything. He was very, very quiet Asian man, probably in his mid-50s or early 60s. And he just, very uncommon, he just spoke up and he said, Americans, it's strange, your idea of love. He goes, in America, you get married because you assume you're in love. He goes, you know, where I came from, we get married with the hope that we can discover what love is before we die. And then he said a very beautiful thing. He said, you know, because to him this was part of love, what I'm going to say. He said, you know, it took me 15 years to totally accept my wife. And then he got a big smile, and he proudly said, only 15 years. Do you see what I mean? Now that's a man that has begun to discover love. See what I mean? That's not the same as, you know, what we normally think of. It's not, you know, the end to the romantic comedy movie, or, you know, there's obviously can be love there. It can be there, of course, but, you know, love, it's something else. It's not the thing that it's sold as, is it? It's not the thing that you just immediately assume because you feel some way. I'm in love. No, something else is going on. It may be very beautiful and wonderful. Enjoy it. Good, fine. But it's not necessarily love either. It might turn into it. It might not. Love is, here's my description of love. Love is that thing that once you fall into, you never, ever, ever fall out of. There's no such thing as falling out of love with anything. If you can fall out of it, it wasn't love you fell out of. Love isn't something you can turn off. Love is that thing that it doesn't really even get turned on. It's recognized, it's that which you recognize is there. You know, we all, but you like everything else about this, we all have to discover it from the inside, you know, but it's there. Love is that thing that visits you, you know, at the oddest moments. Like, you know, you've heard me tell that story, the guy with the cream puff that ate it, that I fell in love with, yeah. Big old huge fat guy with his, I guess his girlfriend, you wouldn't know by the look on his face, and devouring a cream puff, and looks very unpleasant. And I just looked at it, and I was sitting there with my wife, Mukti, and we were just sitting in this farmer's market, and I just started to, tears just rolled down my eyes. And my wife knows me so well. She just said, before I said anything, she goes, "Oh, Adya, again?" And I just turned, I said, "Yeah, I love that guy. And I probably wouldn't want to spend 2 seconds with him because he didn't look very pleasant, but, you know, it just comes and gets you, you know, just, wow. Yeah, you know. You know, that thing, you just, all of a sudden you see it somewhere where you least expect it often, you know? So maybe it'll be like that. It's just there, like, poof, you know, a tear for 5 minutes, then gone, you know, nothing, just that. Sometime, maybe it will last a lifetime, you know, who knows? But it's that thing, you see, it's that. Yeah.